Let me check on YouTube if we are broadcasting. All right, we are on. If you let me, Ana, I will say some words in Portuguese for the audience. So, hello everyone, good morning, welcome. Desculpa, eu ia falar em português, eu estava falando em inglês.
Sejam bem-vindos.
Obrigado, André, obrigado. Bom dia, pessoal. Sejam bem-vindos ao segundo dia do Encontro de Economia Institucional do Einst. Né? Estou aqui com o Andrei Vernikov e a Ana Kuricheva, que são as pessoas responsáveis pelo texto que vai ser apresentado agora. Antes, eles me deram a licença de eu apresentar algumas questões aqui sobre o nosso dia de ontem, né? Nesse momento, no nosso dia de ontem, a nossa sessão de abertura ela foi visualizada 186 vezes, a nossa sessão 1, 197 vezes, a nossa mesa redonda Mulheres na Heterodoxia, 147 vezes, a sessão 2, 159 vezes, e a sessão 3, 148 vezes. Né? Então, eu acho que a gente já pode assumir que o evento ele foi muito bem sucedido, né? Estamos lidando com economia institucional original, né? É uma coisa nichada dentro da heterodoxia e a gente está tendo assim, uma grande audiência. O evento está sendo um sucesso. Continuaremos com esse sucesso hoje e abriremos muito bem esse dia, porque estamos aqui com o Andrei e com a Ana. O Andrei Vernikov é um grande intelectual que atua no setor bancário. Ele ocupou importantes cargos executivos no setor bancário e financeiro, incluindo o Banco do Comércio e Desenvolvimento do Mar Negro, na Grécia, o ABN Aerobank, Moscou, o Fundo Monetário Internacional em Washington, D.C., né, o Banco Central da Rússia, também em Moscou, né, e atuou como diretor em diversos bancos e empresas. Atualmente, o Andrei ele é pesquisador sênior no Instituto de Economia da Academia de Ciência da Rússia, em Moscou. De 2006 a 2016, ele atuou como professor de bancos na Higher School of Economics, em Moscou. Outros interesses, os interesses de pesquisa do Andrei, né, eles envolvem a economia institucional, a economia do desenvolvimento, sistema bancário e a governança corporativa. O Andrei é poliglota, como vocês puderam perceber, né? Ele fala russo, inglês, espanhol, francês, checo e fala português, né? Então, ele consegue entender, né, o que eu estou falando aqui, não me deixa mentir, né, naquilo que eu estou falando. Né? Então, agradeço muito ao Andrei por ter aceito o convite, né, por estar apresentando essa palestra aqui para a gente. Agradeço a Ana também. O texto que o Andrei vai apresentar, ele foi escrito em coautoria com a Ana. Ele se chama Critical Finance Through the Lens of Original Institutional Economics. Então, é um assunto bastante instigador, né, que o Andrei apresentará para a gente. Andrei, muitíssimo obrigado por estar conosco, tá? A audiência é sua.
Muito obrigado, professor Felipe. Eu agradeço esta oportunidade de estar com vocês. É uma experiência bastante nova. Eu falo muitas vezes nas conferências académicas, mas este é um caso especial e aprecio muito esta possibilidade de me dirigir às pessoas às pesquisadoras e pesquisadores jovens que façam estudos neste campo que é de grande interesse para mim. Agora, Felipe disse muito generosamente que eu falo português. Eu falava português, mas sem experiência, este hábito eu praticamente perdi. E eu não tenho certeza de que vou poder aguentar uma discussão acadêmica em português. Por isso, peço desculpas, vou falar em inglês. Também para a Ana compreender, mas depois depois da apresentação, se alguém quiser fazer, se alguém tiver dificuldades com o inglês, podem fazer o seu comentário em qualquer das línguas, em qualquer das línguas. Espanhol também pode ser, português, inglês, é para vocês. Agora, como é que nós podemos demonstrar os slides? Eu os tenho aqui agora. Ótimo, aqui está. Agora já está. Pois, o tema que nós, the subject that we will be debating today actually joins two strong bodies of literature. There's plenty of literature on original institutional economics, and many of you have also contributed to it. Also, there are many studies about finance, and particularly there is well, actually, it's not exactly a school of thought, but it's an intellectual tradition, which I call critical finance. Now, I think one of the novelties is that we are trying to merge these two, in the sense that we are trying to use the lens of original institutional economics in applied studies of finance. And we are kind of more leaning towards a critical view of finance. Classics of original institutional economics, like Thorsten Veblen or John Commons, they have written a lot about pecuniary culture, about money, about financiers, about what they do wrong, about how finance people sabotage the society, many other things. Also, well, Thorsten Veblen, as you know, was extremely sarcastic, and he had a very good sense of humor. He made very many critical and sarcastic remarks about the capitalist system in general and about its representatives in particular. That being the case, you can often hear that, well, Veblen is a thing of the past, that it all was happening more than 100 years ago, that it's not relevant anymore, that, well, his analysis was not technical enough, that, capitalism has advanced a lot since then, and so what Veblen had to say, well, it's interesting reading, it's fun, but it has no relevance to what's happening today. We disagree, and that's the whole point. And we try to use the approaches of institutional economics to look at matters, at financial and related issues today. One of them, of course, is the financialization. So in Veblen's jargon, he would have perhaps said that the pecuniary culture had its triumph. Now it's everywhere. He saw the trend starting over 100 years ago, but now, of course, it's much more advanced. So pecuniary culture has won, you may say. Also, Veblen, of course, was focused on the United States and other industrialized countries. But this phenomenon has embraced all economies worldwide, including developing and emerging economies, including Brazil, Russia, India, all countries you can think of that belong to the same league. And there is a strong connection between financialization and the subordinated development or subordinated dependent capitalism that is developing in our type of countries. Also, actually, financialization has become an extremely important avenue, an extremely important tool to keep developing countries in their dependent and subordinate position. So I'm here, as you see on the slide, referring to two recent papers that I liked. I think they give you a pretty comprehensive and correct view of that. Now, why is it that we are doing it today? Well, the motivation is not only to find methodological and theoretical ground or foundation to develop applied research, but also to try to see how it fits within the academic world. Unfortunately, original institution economics is not a strong or very popular school of thought, at least in many leading universities in the West. Now, I was very pleasantly surprised that in Brazil, you have this nucleus, or let's say this stronghold of original institutional economics. And I was really surprised. In my countries, I still have failed to identify something, and I'm trying to set up something like this, but I'm still at much earlier stage. It's good that you have even your own conferences, which I don't think many countries have. Now, in the preamble to the conference, I read that there are two important international organizations, both in the United States of America. One is of course, the AFE, the Association for Institutional Economics, and another one also for institutional thought. Well, let me add, there is a European one called EPE, EAEP, European Association for Evolutionary Political Economy. It was set up with great assistance from AFE members, so that they view it like their European franchise in a way. And EPE conferences are attended usually by many people from AFE. So to a large extent, it's let's say the same community. I'm not sure the same is happening vice versa. I'm not sure many people travel to the United States to AFE conferences. I spoke twice or three times there, but every time online. I never traveled to the United States. Anyhow, so in Europe, you have this stronghold, but on the national level, I don't think many countries can be proud, like Brazil, saying that, well, we have this school of thought and we develop original institutional economics and we try to apply it to today's reality or to Brazilian reality, to Latin American reality. So I was really intrigued, and that was the reason why I actually volunteered, and I very welcome the invitation to be with you because, well, I don't have many colleagues. Me and Dana, sometimes we feel like we are alone fighting a lost battle. But now it's very nice seeing that we have colleagues in Brazil. So it's important not only to find the right place for this kind of views, but also to affect the teaching, because I think it all comes from universities. So if somebody from the level of bachelor studies has been indoctrinated in a given school of thought, it's extremely difficult then to convert. So a person takes something for granted, and then there's no way you can challenge, and then he will teach his own she or he will teach own students, and then it's reproduced like that. So every time it's happening, well, I see that the chance to promote original institutional ideas are lesser. Now, financialization. I'm not going to tell you too much about what financialization is. There are many definitions. All of them are correct. It's like, several blind people are trying to describe an elephant, and they touch a certain part of it and say, well, one person is focused on the household, another person is focused on the corporate level, another on the macro level. So there are many definitions of what financialization is. It's when finance and money becomes the foremost motivation, sometimes the only motivation, and subordinates everything else. When all your life rotates around money, about profit, about financial indicators, about stock market performance, about valuation, things like this. So this phenomenon, I think, is ubiquitous. Everything you look at can be explained from this viewpoint. So whatever problem you touch from this angle, you can explain very many things, I think. And even if you are not, let's say, an adept of financialization studies, earlier or later you'll come at at the pecuniary matters, and without them, you won't be able to explain what's going on. Well, I'm giving you some classics, what I think are studies on financialization, and I have no time to go into depth explaining what each of them says, but the financialization is like I said, when finance is overwhelming over everything else. Finance captures even some industrial companies become financial companies because their financial activity in terms of profits that it generates becomes more important than their productive activities. You can see it in practically every industry. Now, the mainstream economic discourse is in favor of financialization. And historically, of course, there has been many studies explaining how finance promotes capitalism and how finance is totally indispensable for growth and how finance is essential for well-being and so on. I'm not going to debate with this. I'm not saying that this is wrong, but this is only one part of the story. And there's another part of the story which mainstream economic theories do not really focus on. If something goes wrong, they say, well, of course, there are failures here and there. Market system sometimes produces this kind of unwanted or unexpected effects. But overall, there's no alternative. See, this is the doctrine that they are trying to kind of to nail into your heads, that there's no alternative. Finance is king, and without finance, you do nothing. I'm very far from becoming extremist, and I'm very far from saying that that finance is not necessary. It absolutely is, but its place and also its role and its effects have to be studied more carefully, preferably without prejudice. Now, a few other interesting papers that you can see on this slide is how the religion of finance has been promoted. Actually, there is an interesting study by Assa who actually explained this statistical phenomenon. And interestingly, the statistical conventions have changed a lot a few decades ago. As recently as 50 years ago, finance was considered not as a sector contributing to GDP, but as a sector which actually consumes the produced GDP, which some sectors produce and other sectors redistribute and other sectors consume. So actually it was more looked at as a cost than as a contribution. So Assa, in his insightful paper, actually not one, but more than one, explains how finance was the treatment of finance, how it changed, so that now the financial sector presumably makes a contribution. So from this viewpoint, finance has become equal to industry or to agriculture. See, the finance people presumably also contribute to GDP. Also, there are very common claims that growth in consumption is always good for growth and welfare, even if it's driven by credit. So this discourse is very strongly promoted and exported from developed countries to developing ones, because the capitalism has to expand every time, so it cannot stop expanding. So it involves new countries, new markets, new strata of the society which were not financialized before. So households were not, then they became financialized. And this is happening, as I said, in developing countries like, or in emerging market countries like both our countries. Okay, now the classics of original institutionalism were more kind of balanced, were more reluctant to praise finance. They were rather critical about very many aspects. Now, these views of original institutional economists contributed, I think, to great extent to why this school of thought has been marginalized, because it doesn't fit well with this propaganda of financial capitalism. So this was a reason why it was kind of fell out of the mainstream. That's my interpretation. Currently, there are many critical finance studies. So the discourse covering finance has changed a lot. Now you even I'm not talking about newspapers. I'm talking about papers published in respected journals with good standing from Q1 in Scopus or Web of Science. Not every journal, of course, would publish this kind of papers, but there are also papers where heterodox economists can publish, and they are pretty harsh about financial capitalism and what it does. Even the language they use, you can see on the slide, see fraud, parasitism, cannibalism, usury, this kind of stuff. This wording is pretty strong. Now, here are a few classical works that you can take a look at if you are interested in this problem and want to see what Commons, Veblen, and others, and Mitchell and others thought about financial capitalism. I think one is missing here. One I like is called The Engineers and the Price System. Actually, it's a relatively short essay, very bright, I think very interesting. But others also are very good. See, well, the Theory of Leisure class everybody knows, but there are a few others which are, I would say, less known. Each of them is very interesting from on its own merit, so it has to be read. Mostly they are relatively short and pretty easy reading. At least Weber's writing are fun reading always. All right. Now, here I try to summarize some points of the evolutionary and anthropological approach on the pecuniary culture, on the money culture, and what drives it. Yeah. So Veblen linked it to the proclivities, or to the qualities of the human being itself. It says that there are different proclivities, different human kind of capabilities that in a certain combination lead to productive conduct or to unproductive conduct. So, contrary to what we hear from mainstream economics, greed in Veblen's mind led to unproductive features of conduct. So you hear greed is good. Greed drives your activity. No, Veblen didn't think it that way. He thought greed is counterproductive. Now, also this pecuniary emulation, when people try to compete with each other, displaying wealth. And here's where the phenomenon of conspicuous consumption comes from. People always try to underline or to express or to display their status, and they compete with others in doing so. So everything works. Even women's dresses work that way. And actually, Veblen has a very nice essay which is called The Economic Theory of Women's Dress. Fun reading also. He explains economists are critical of it, and they say that, well, there's no algebra, there's no statistics, there's no this, there's no that. But what we, Anna and me, in our studies, what we find important is not only the methodological or the technical part of it, but extremely importantly, the ethical part of it. It matters what Veblen himself and Commons and Mitchell and others, what they thought was good or correct and what they thought was wrong. And if one pretends that, a scholar can evade these questions, I think it's an illusion. I was like this myself for many years. I also was convinced that you should try to disregard your own kind of personal feelings, and you should try to be neutral, and you should try to be technical. Well, it has its limits. You still are driven by your own ideas and by your own, let's say, understanding what's wrong, and what's right. So Veblen and other institutional economists offer you a platform how to look at things. Of course, the instrumental part has developed a lot over 100 years. You have a lot of modeling, you have statistical methods, you have absolutely everything, even now artificial intelligence. But it doesn't replace and there's still room for an ethical point. It's important what you as a person think is good and what you as a person think is bad. And however strong you try to resist that, it's unavoidable. If you don't have to recognize it, but it means that you'll be taken away by somebody else who has his own agenda and his own ethical code. So it's important that the OEA had its own kind of approach to things. Now the phenomena have, of course, changed, but the recent applications are made possible by this ethical view, and interestingly, they become insightful. Suddenly, the blurred picture becomes clearer. You start to see to have an assessment. We have a basis how to assess phenomena. For instance, we try to apply some of Veblen and Commons ideas in our applied studies, and we use statistics of today. For instance, we try to see the interplay between consumerist culture and household financialization and the debt finance growth. Now, I have no time to stop right now. Veblen and others underscored that there's a dichotomy, there's a difference between industry and commerce, between industry and business. We think these are synonyms. Well, for Veblen, they were not. So Veblen usually try to differentiate the productive activity and other activity. Now, in the classroom, all mainstream teachers and mainstream articles tell you that it doesn't matter. So all business is good. Any economic activity is good. Anything which is legal, which is not against the law. If you legalize prostitution, then prostitution becomes a good thing for GDP. I mean, what can I say? You legalize drugs becomes immediately an important contributor to GDP, right? Well, Veblen would not agree with that. For him, it did matter how you make your money. Now, this point is not very popular today, but I mean, this is how he viewed things. So for Veblen, industrial inclination was important. Another interesting concept was sabotage. You may think that sabotage is a journalistic term. Well, for Veblen, it was not. And I agree, because actually it allows to understand many things which are happening today. You can see very many examples how businessmen or large corporations, for the sake of financial goals, financial performance, sacrifice other things. And not only the environment, they sacrifice the production basis sometimes. They disregard the interests of their workers. They disregard many other things because they want to achieve financial results. All right. So these are, let's say, ethical points, but they can be interpreted and applied today. Well, another concept which Veblen and Commons and Grucci used to promote is the public purpose. Well, that would itself sound as a Marxism for many people. However, it doesn't have to be. I mean, if you start thinking about it, some activity is always becomes part of some framework, and it does some contribution for the dynamics of the society and the economy. So it's not a bad thing to try to distinguish where is that this activity leads you. So what is it that you spend your life on? I mean, well, you produce your well-being, you earn, it's important. But, at the end of the day, what is it that it contributes to? So Veblen could distinguish what is serviceable for the community, what was right, what was constructive, and what was disserviceable for the community. However, financially attractive or financially strong. So he also introduces the concept of waste, and also many other concepts which have been kind of phased out from the teaching and from the research in economics. So I think that these ethical and these intellectual points are helpful for a scholar if he wants to develop his own view, not only to repeat what the textbooks say, but his own view of what's happening. Now, for example, take the concept of sabotage. Like I said, it's not a conspiracy theory by no means. It can be proven with facts and with statistics that some activities really stimulate behaviors that are destructive, that are destroying the community welfare in the longer run. I'm not the first to notice that. There have been a few papers by scholars, which you see on the screen, Svetailova and Palam. They clearly speak about sabotage of the financiers, of many other things. And not only that, you can see, for example, scholars like Stiglitz also use the same thing when he describes the crisis of 2008 and how the American finance tycoons have behaved. He clearly calls it that's sabotage. It is sabotage. All right, let's move on. So also they bring many arguments of why they think financial institutions, financial activity has to be regulated. They apparently did not believe that the banker capitalism, as Commons calls it, that the banker capitalism would tackle itself and would resolve the problems. He apparently was not naive to believe this. He said that, it has to be regulated. The society has to drive it in some direction. And also, the finance is the source of power. So it's all about power after all. So it's not neutral like we are made to believe, that these studies are not neutral. Whatever you believe, whether financial markets should be regulated, should be deregulated, it's about power. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's about power. It's about who's gonna run your life, or who's gonna drive you in this or another direction. Now, this was kind of a demagogical part of it, if you wish, or theoretical part. We have done a few empirical cases, and here today, to make you relax a little bit for a few minutes, I'll show that we have studied an empirical case, and we have tried to apply these ideas in our research. Now, the title "Serving Banking Services," I don't know how you understand it, but the meaning is that I try to play with words. Banking services presumably should serve the society because they're services, but I'm trying to argue that it's the opposite. It's the other way around. Is that the society is made to serve banking services, that banks kind of take advantage of the society. And in this particular case, it's about academics. So it's about people like you and me. Because I think that financialization has been promoted greatly by us, by scholars, by teachers. And we try to investigate how it has been happening. Now, let me give you some background. Well, the background is this. There are many measures of financialization. What is a financialized society and what is not? One of the indicators used for this purpose is the ratio between private loans and GDP. Here is some data from IMF, a relatively recent one. The column in red is Russia. The column in green is Brazil, by the way. We are in the same league. But what you see that there are countries which have much greater ratio. The most important point is how you look at it and how you feel about it. Interestingly, it's not a technical thing. The technical view of it is the mainstream one. It says, some countries are less advanced in their financialization. Their financial sector is relatively small. So what? Guess what? You should expand your financial sector. Because why? Well, can't you see the most advanced Western countries on the left, which means everybody should emulate them. Yeah, if somebody has this ratio over 200%, that's your benchmark. This is where you should aim. Why you should aim there, and whether it's good for your own country, and who exactly benefits from it. No. These questions economists prefer to avoid. They don't want to ask this question. They show you that the leading G7 countries or something like that have that, so it means that you should also follow suit. Okay, that's the school of thought. Well, I don't think this is the case, but this is a reality which you all face. So it takes a lot of courage to argue that, maybe it's a blessing in disguise that if you have relatively small ratio, it means that our populations and our companies are not as heavily indebted. So we are in a better situation. But try to argue it if you publish your article in one of the leading American or British journals. They will reject you just because of this, because, well, that's not the mainstream view. All right. Now, Russia was, in a way, a natural experiment. You can see how household debt has become a social habit. Just 15, 20 years ago, it was a very small phenomenon. Banks did not lend to physical persons, to the population, to households. Okay, and households had no recourse to bank loans. They had their savings. They could borrow from friends. They could borrow from family. I don't know, but they could not borrow from banks for the purpose of their consumption. I'm only talking about household lending. I'm not touching even the business finance or trade finance. I'm only touching by households. And why we chose this subject? Well, here, because I think you can develop an ethical stance. And the ethical stance can be either you admit that you should rely on your own and you should not have debt, or you disagree with that. Okay, and here this slides shows you how this mindset has been reprogrammed and changed in a matter of one generation. You can see less than 20 years, and you see an explosion of household debts. You can see that it's growing by the exponent, except for the periods of the exogenous shocks or crises. Yeah, people are used now to living in debt, which essentially means that they have become used to consuming more than they earn. This was not a normal thing just 20 years ago. It was classical to consume only within your means. It was unthinkable to consume more than you earn. My parents or my grandparents had, debt was a taboo in our family. Today, in practically every family, it's considered as one of the available options. Please take a look at these two pictures. On the left side, you see how financialization goes in parallel with deindustrialization. I think these two phenomena are well connected. Of course, manufacturing still produces more value added than the financial sector. However, it has been declining or at best stagnating, while the financial industry has been ever growing. So it's now it's about 5% or 5.5% of GDP. It seems a small thing, but it already exceeds agriculture. Yeah, you can think, wow, Russia is a country of huge space, a lot of agriculture, yes, but in terms of contribution to GDP, finance has replaced. And on the right slide, you see something which probably Veblen would like to see also, and these are the average monthly nominal wages in different sectors. The red column is the average throughout the economy. The green column is the manufacturing, and the blue column is banking and finance. And you can see 2.5 times now the average salary, average wage, monthly wage in banking exceeds the average monthly wage in manufacturing. Why is that? I mean, is that fair though? They tell you, because it's very sophisticated. Well, because it takes a lot of study. Well. In terms of hardness or in terms of working conditions, you can't compare finance people who work in nice, tidy well-lighted, warm offices and people who work in the manufacturing, especially in mining or in other productive sectors. So I don't think it's quote unquote deserved, although the concept of deservance is a very debatable one, and many economists disagree with it. Now, our research question has been, why and how are the narrative for financialization spread by scholars? And for that, we have taken 84 articles written by 90 journals and published by the best Russian journals within the period of 20 years. We use different databases, especially those that collect the biblio data from the journals, and we use several keywords to identify articles which wrote on the given subject. And we wanted to know what exactly is it that the scholars like my colleagues, what exactly is it they're promoting? Well, let me tell you what we have discovered. We have discovered a lot of discourse which endorses bank lending to households, or if you look at it from another angle, which endorses households becoming more indebted and becoming more debt dependent. So the text in italics is the one we borrowed. See, you see quotation marks everywhere. So this is the arguments that our colleagues use in their academic articles to explain that there should be more debt. So consumer loans are positioned as overall beneficial for the household. They say, it's a good thing, yeah, you should do it. Yeah. Another kind of school of reasoning is that it's normal. Why is it important? Because, like I said, because there was aversion of people to go into loans. The old school, or the older generation did not really approve it. So this practice was socially not very accepted. So it was extremely important to reprogram people's mind, including to reprogram the minds of the students like you, or the teachers like me or Anna, to reprogram that so that we make propaganda of loans, that we explained, don't be ashamed. It's normal. Everybody does it. I mean, how can you live without it? Look around. Everyone has it. You know, well, what else? You're gonna be like a black sheep. Yeah, do what everybody does. It's okay. I mean, it's fun. It's fine. I mean, don't worry. It's fine. See. Now, third kind of way of reasoning. At the macro level, nothing happens. Don't worry. Yeah, it's growing, but look at France, or look at Belgium. Yeah, you have migrated share. You have way to go before. Don't worry. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. The fourth one is that, it's actually a manipulation. They tell you that you deserve it. Not only you can ask for a loan, you can borrow. No, not only that, you deserve it. I mean, don't you deserve it? I mean, they are addressing a person who has not earned anything. You say, don't you deserve a good vacation? Don't you deserve the most recent iPhone? Don't you deserve a BMW? And of course, I mean, why not? I mean, look at you. Why not? You should. Live now. Live now. Yeah, why worry about it? Live now. Yeah, you should do it now. And actually, it falls, of course, on very fertile ground, because especially young people, they need to approve themselves. They need to become popular. They need to be approved by their peers, by their partners. Extremely importantly. So they these kind of arguments actually manipulates. It actually moves the focus from your own independent view of whether I should do it. It proves that you are entitled to it. Not only you can technically do it, but you should not. No, you are entitled and you should do it. All right. And fifthly, not exhaustively, of course, but we kind of made a grouping of the types of reasoning that you can find. Is the scholars, academic scholars, usually prefer to talk about the phenomenon from the bank viewpoint. See, you can also very often read that, well, collateralized loans are better, that they are safe. Well, you can ask, safe for whom? Safe for the banks, perhaps. Are they safe for the borrower? I don't know. I don't know what's the enforcement practice in Brazil, but what I read from people like Joe Stiglitz, when hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans were kicked out of their houses after the bust, you realize, well, safety is not exactly embracing both parties. Yeah, it's safer for the banks, not necessarily safer for the borrowers. Okay, findings. The most sad finding that we and Dana had from this empirical case is that most of our colleagues, or to be more precise, 64 out of 84, apologize and endorse financial expansion via consumer lending. So economists take the sides of the lender, not the common man. You see, the common man I put in quotation, it's not my words, it's Common's word, John Common's word. The common man, he cared about common man, but our colleagues today apparently don't care too much about common man. So why do they do this? Well, of course, there has been strong intellectual change in our teaching, in our academic tradition, in many cases under the influence of external colleagues, external financing. There's been a lot of grant financing of research work. And of course, you were expected to say certain things. If you are too original, well, that will be your last grant. All right. Also, the bandwagon effect or the fashion. See, if everybody in your department starts talking that, finance is good, let's say financial expansion is a nice thing, or my country should follow that, it's extremely difficult for you to say something else. Yeah, unless you have the whole department that believes in some ideas, but that's a very rare thing. So now the managers of education make sure that this doesn't happen. Right? Now, another interesting finding that we had is that the papers in economics are different in their view from the papers in sociology, history, anthropology, especially and social psychology. Those are more caring, those are more worried about the effects of household debt. Economists pretend not to bother, not to care about household debt. They say, it's all right, it's a macro thing, don't worry, it's normal. Yeah. Well, social psychologists or anthropologists don't believe it's normal. And that's important kind of watershed. So, what we say, Anna and me, I have talked to at many conferences, and we are very well accepted by political scholars, by anthropologists, sociologists, less so by economists. What can you do? Lastly, financial literacy not necessarily moves things in the right direction. Financial literacy, in the way it's taught now, mostly teaches you to borrow and to use banks more, not to be more independent in your financial behavior. All right. And here I'm about to finalize. I have only a couple of slides left. So the interpretation of Veblen and other institutionalists was that the education has become the servant of the financial capitalism, that the academics and professors contribute to the overwhelming position of the financial capitalists. Now, one book I write a lot by Eric Reinert. He's kind of our contemporary. He's alive. And I like this book a lot. And his approach, I think, is pretty much in line. And he says that economics is strongly intertwined with power and ideology. And economics has become has departed from being a scientific discipline and became a free market cheerleader. Yeah, it's a strong expression, but well, that's what it is. Now, somebody has to bust those myths. Who's going to be that? Who's going to take this responsibility or sacrifice his academic career to bust these myths? I don't know. But the fact is, and here I conclude, this is my last slide, universities have contributed and continue contributing to the financialization of life and financialization of households in particular. What each of us will do, well, we make our own choices. So far, and we discovered this in our empirical case, economists have appeared more on the side of the lenders, not the borrowers. So we need, and we don't see figures like John Common, figures of the same caliber, who, as he said himself, would stand on the side of the common man. We don't see such figures. It's not very rewarded these days, and importantly, we think original institutional economics is relevant. When somebody tells you it's a thing of the past, it's outdated, it's obsolete, don't believe. Don't believe. I don't think it's true. And what matters what is very important is the ethicality and the holism in their anti-pecuniary view. So you can integrate it in your research agenda, even if it's a strong research program with a lot of modern data, of modern statistics or modeling. These views can be integrated this. And importantly, I think, and I'm trying kind of, well, not to recruit some of you, but to make somebody think that, well, we can contribute to what we believe is good for our countries and our societies in our areas, in our research. It depends how we view and how we describe things. To bust myths, it's very important to bust myths, and there are so many myths around us. Okay, and lastly, I think reindustrialization, which is a topic for example, for Russia, I believe for many other countries, I don't think it's possible if financialization is not contained. And this is all. We had several papers published on the subject, some of them in Russian, mostly in English, one in Forum for Social Economics, two in Journal of Economic Issues. So if somebody's interested, we are here. It would actually be total fun to make a comparative research of two countries, if somebody is willing to go for it. Yeah, Russia and Brazil, things like this, because I think we're in the same league in many respects. Okay, so we have done a few empirical studies. We are a few more are underway. So we are moving on, and we need friends and colleagues, and we'll be happy to do this together with some of you. All right, I'm done, Felipe. There are plenty of questions. How shall I tackle them?
All right, so thank you very much, Andrei. It was a very interesting presentation. I think it's a very good way to start the day. So
the thing is, I can't hear.
You can hear me? All right, so I think we are facing the same problem.
Shall I try to take some of the questions? What do you think?
That's fine. Here, one question.
Philippe, I can hear you, but I think it would be fair. I try to address some of the questions in the chat. There were a few. Would you mind? If you mind, just disconnect me, okay? Because I can't hear what you say, and I can't read. Okay, let me take the questions. Perguntas. In recent weeks, Brazil has allowed banks to provide loans to individuals with fixed salary guarantees. The amounts are deducted directly from payroll. Well, that's one of the techniques. Yeah, they make life easier for them. So essentially, it becomes a collateral. Their future loans. So if they get the right to deduct it directly, so banks feel safer. So, well, I'm not surprised. What can I say? It's part of the same trend. Yeah, banks have their lobbyists in the parliament to make their life easier and to have access to people who could not borrow before. So they want to involve them also in order to what? To milk them, to keep milking them for next decades. The argument is that interest rates will drop. Could this be a case of financial sector sabotage? Well, in this particular case, I don't know. However, interestingly, everything that happens, somehow finance people manage to benefit from it anyway. Yeah, exchange rate of your currency goes up, somebody benefits. It drops, somebody benefits again. Interest rates, same thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if banks can benefit on both sides when interest rates go up and when interest rates go down, because unlike individuals and unlike normal industrial corporates and unlike small businesses, banks know how to hedge themselves. So they don't lose from any direction that interest rates go. We can lose. We are exposed to interest rate risks. Banks know how to hedge themselves. We don't. That's the difference between us. So it's like you're playing cards with somebody who can see your cards, but you can see theirs. Thanks for great presentation. Obrigado. You mentioned that original institution is not widely present in Russian academia. How is the situation with the heterodox traditions? There are many heterodox traditions. Russians are known in producing many economic ideas. However, since the early 1990s, they all fell victim to mainstream economics. It was like a train moving, and nobody could stand on its way. So all these other heterodox traditions were also swept away, if you wish, by mainstream economics. So you have 1-2 persons here and there, but there's not like a single department or single university who sticks to heterodox tradition. That's my assessment. I may be biased. Are they more developed or influential? Hard to say. The Marxist tradition is strong. Marxist tradition is still strong, relatively strong. Let me put it this way. Interestingly, Marxists did not take Veblen on board, and for some time I was really curious why Veblen was so critical of capitalism, was so sarcastic about bourgeois, and was, why didn't they take him on board? And then somebody intelligent explained me, Andrei, don't you see, Veblen and Comas, they were not radical enough. I said, how not radical? Yes, they said that capitalism can be reformed, that capitalism can be made more kind of reasonable and so on, like Veblen. And it was naive. It was, this reformist, vulgar, bourgeois thinking that Marxists disregarded. That's the reason why Veblen was not in the textbooks. Actually, I was surprised because Veblen was so bright and so was vehemently anti-bourgeois, but still. Amazing presentation, thank you. Any relation between your view and the modern monetary theory? I can see a few relations between your critical views and theirs. I wouldn't be surprised if there is in common. I have to look into it. Frankly, I have not looked at it. I never tried to cooperate with MMT scholars. Maybe I should. Answer, I have to look into it. I don't know. Probably. If it's not abusing your goodwill, I have another question. There's another institutional inheritance probably from the USSR that in certain ways holds back the financialization in Russia. It's a good question. I would say it's not the heritage from the USSR itself. I would put it this way. I see countries where tradition is sticking harder, and countries where people are kind of more conservative, not necessarily in terms of communist ideology, absolutely not necessarily. For instance, take Germany. Germans were known to be conservative, to be very accounting, to be very financially prudent. In Germany, for a long period, credit cards were not very popular. People did not want to use credit cards. People rightly said that if I earn money and I have savings, I can use a debit card only to spend what I have. So it took a tremendous efforts by banks to promote credit cards within people like German population. And this you can also see in few other countries. So I would say it's not necessarily the Soviet tradition or the communism that makes people how to say, resistant to financialization, but it's other things, can be religious views as well. I wouldn't be surprised if, say, religion has an impact on it, that religious teaching or commandments make you more prudent and make you avoid debt. Anna and me, we studied this and we looked at Russian folklore of the 18th, 19th century, and we came to this conclusion. Can tax on finance be seen as a form of sabotage, or the liberalization of financial activities sabotages more? This is a very important field. As you see, I was not normative in what I said. I told you how I see it, and I made an empirical case. I didn't tell you what to do. There was recently a special issue in two issues of Journal of Institutional Economics about definancialization, of what you can do to contain financialization. I still have to study this more in detail. Every country, has to look for its own solution if it believes that definancialization is a good thing. I don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Tax on finance, this Tobin tax, I'm not sure what exactly effect it will produce. I don't know. The finance has been known to adapt to any kind of institutional innovation. So it can take advantage of anything. You try to do something, but they're 2 steps ahead of you. Not only because they have lobbyists and they influence the laws, but they have other opportunities. They can move funds between countries. They can do many things or they can just reload the cost on the user, on the borrower. So it takes a lot of research and a lot of empirical work to see what works and what doesn't. I'm not sure about tax on finance. Many countries, including Brazil, have taken debt to young people as a means to pay their way into universities. Has this happened in Russia? Not to such an extent. Education loans are still a very new thing, and I don't think it's a very common thing. It is starting. Some banks are starting this, but I don't think it has taken a substantial dimension. So far, the government has offered a lot of public financing, funding for the education. So essentially, there was no need. If you want to study, you can always find a place in the university, a place that doesn't require payment, or you can take a slightly different career. Of course, if you want to become, I don't know, a lawyer, then probably you'll have to pay. But if you pursue many other careers, there are many free or even subsidized or student vacancies that you can take. We have heard of the Journal of Institutional Studies. Do you relate in some way to the institutional economics of Veblen and Commons? I think they do. It's a little different bunch, but to a large extent, it's an overlapping community, I would say. Maybe it's not exactly the same people as in the Journal of Economic Issues, but there are people also who know each other and who go to the same conferences Journal of Institutional Studies. It's a Russian one, by the way. There's Journal of Institutional Economics. That's a British one. But Journal of Institutional Studies, it's issued in Russia by the university where my co-author Anna works. She works in the Southern Federal University, a Universidade Federal do Sul. Mas neste caso, o Sul não é o Rio Grande do Sul, é o sul da Rússia, que é a cidade de Rostov-na-Don. Okay, and they release a journal which is in the Web of Science, by the way. So it's a good one. I have published several times there. I think this was the last question that I can see in the chat, and that's the best I can do because I can't hear anyone else.
Can you listen to me? I think it's not possible. It is. Well, no, it's not possible. Pessoal, peço desculpas, o Andrei teve um problema com áudio no início, a gente conseguiu consertar, mas parece que esse problema voltou depois da fala dele, tá? Peço desculpas aí, pessoal, mas a gente pelo menos conseguiu fazer aí a apresentação, né? Bom, é difícil fechar sem o Andrei tá escutando, né, pessoal? Mas eu acho que o Andrei apresentou vários elementos muito provocativos aí para a gente, né? Uma economia que possui similaridades e disparidades, né, com a economia brasileira. Eu acho que coloca muito a gente para pensar, né, a respeito. Então, mesmo sem o Andrei estar escutando aí, eu gostaria muito de agradecer profundamente o Andrei, né, por ter feito essa apresentação. Então, Andrei, muito obrigado. Hein?